Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. It is Friday, June 12th, 2015, and I'm Leanne McAdoo. Here is a look at tonight's top stories.
Tonight, how a trade deal would affect us all. Then, what's your racial identity? And a top economist predicts a collapse after October. That's next on the INFOWARS Nightly News.
Don't think you're part of the power structure because you're a trendy out there. And because you go along with this, they see you as a useful idiot. That's what Lenin called his moron followers.
Well, some good news for now. Fast Track Authority has failed in the House, and it was actually the Democrats that helped block the final passage of the Fast Track Authority. They rejected a displaced workers aid program that they are normally in support of. Now, Pelosi and Boehner engineered this deal in order to advance a trade framework to the floor. And it was under the agreement that Democrats could score a vote on something called trade adjustment assistance. So TAA was going to be a method to sort of cushion the blow for various workers and industries that are going to be damaged by reallocation to jobs going overseas. So obviously they know that's a big deal that's going to be happening. But Democrats actually blocked the TAA, knowing that if they did that, it would bring the TPA to a screeching halt. Now, if the TPA does pass, which it is scheduled to go up for a vote once again on Tuesday, with a lot of people, including Senator Jeff Sessions, saying it probably is going to pass. Well, now they don't have the bargaining power of the TAA. So there's no protections, no workers' protections that are going to be in place. So I'm hesitant to call this a victory just yet. Now, Nancy Pelosi had this to say. She says, our people would rather have a job than trade assistance. We have to slow down on the fast track bill. She said, whatever the deal is with other countries, we want a better deal for America's workers. So a little frightening there that I agree with Nancy Pelosi, and that's why I'm, a little hesitant. I don't really think that we know everything that's going on at the present moment with the TAA and the TPP and the TPA, all of these confusing acronyms. But that's the key. Whatever is inside the TPP, they know that jobs are going to be lost. And so there has to be some sort of worker protections involved with this. And Fast Track itself is a threat to democracy. Now, Senator Jeff Sessions calls the TPP a new form of global governance structure. He said the creation of it would be authorized through the 6-year Fast Track executive authority. Now, the key here that we keep telling everyone and bringing this up again and again and again, the key is that Fast Track is going to grant the next president the ability to make amendments to any of these trade agreements via executive order. So this Fast Track Authority is for the next 6 years. It will be like a living document. So why would anyone want to hand that power over to any president? That is what is really frightening about this. And a lot of people are saying, oh, we'll have 6 months of debate. No, we will not. We'll have about 60 days to see the TPP, and it's a up or down vote. And Sessions actually goes on and says under Fast Track, Congress transfers its authority to the executive, and they agree to give up several of its most basic powers. These concessions include the power to write legislation, the power to amend legislation, the power to fully consider legislation that's on the floor, and the power to keep debate open until Senate cloture is invoked. And of course, the constitutional requirement that treaties receive a 2/3 vote. He says, in other words, through Fast Track, Congress is basically pre-clearing a political and economic union before a word of that arrangement is even seen by a single person. Now, that's not what we heard by Paul Ryan, who said this is going to give Congress even more power. And Boehner said this is going to create even more jobs. All of these things are lies. So there is a lot of confusion with what's going on. And I tend to agree here with Senator Sessions, who's basically saying that this TPP is going to create a new global governance structure.
In rare form, President Obama raced over to the Capitol to plead with his own party to pass the 3 sections to be voted on in order to fast-track his secret globalist trade deal. A trade deal that Ways and Means Committee Chairman Paul Ryan arrogantly vomited, "It's declassified and made public once it's agreed to." echoing the hubris of Nancy Pelosi's ramming of the middle-class life savings killer Obamacare, when she declared, "We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what's in it." But Pelosi turned the tables on her dear leader on Friday and instructed her party to ignore the president in order to slow the fast-track authority.
And so while I'm a big supporter of TAA, if TAA slows down the fast track, I am prepared to vote against TAA, because then its defeat, sad to say, is the only way that we will be able to slow down the fast track.
15-minute vote. The U.S. House wraps up debate and begins 3 votes on trade measures. The first one dealing with trade adjustment assistance. This provides economic assistance to workers or communities who are displaced by trade deals. The second vote, if that first vote is approved, is on the Trade Promotion Authority, the so-called Fast Track Authority, giving the president the ability to submit trade deals to Congress for an up or down vote. And the last bill, it deals with customs enforcement, a customs enforcement measure that also contains penalties for countries involved in trade deals that also manipulate their currency. But this first vote is essential. It's a 15-minute vote, because if this doesn't clear, it is likely that the second vote won't happen.
At high noon on Friday, Texas time, Obama was handed his tuchus by his own party and the successful pressure waged on them by the labor unions. The final tally on the crushing defeat of the Trade Adjustment Assistance Bill was 302 nays to 126 yays. A 3-to-1 margin of raging Democratic disapproval of their can-do-no-wrong Democratic president's policies. This is what a capitalist democracy, convulsing in its death throes as it attempts its metamorphosis into a corporatocracy, looks like. In order for the TPA, the fast-tracking amendment-free Trade Promotion Authority, to have any teeth, the TAA needed to pass. The self-touted Progressive TAA, a program designed to help workers displaced by trade that Democrats had supported, but when tied to the Trade-Pacific Partnership, took on a whole new meaning of discombobulated trade regulations, dictatorial executive powers, no job displacement welfare, and economic upheaval. The TPA will now hobble on as a toothless beggar into the next administration, as it has a lifespan of 5 years. Throughout the TPA process, Senator Jeff Sessions issued critical alerts, bringing attention to Paul Ryan's deception and saying promoters of fast-track executive authority have relied on semantic obfuscation in an effort to deny the obvious. The president's top priority is obtaining fast-track authority because he knows it will expand his powers and allow him to cement his legacy through the formation of a new political and economic union. Backstabbing House Speaker John Boehner, who voted on the TAA, even though the Speaker rarely votes, now has 2 options to sycophantically toady up to his aristocratic CEO overlords. Either proceed with a revote on Tuesday and attempt to get 80 more votes, or send the legislation back to the Senate for a major overhaul. After the defeat of the TAA, and before the vote on the TPA, Majority Leader Representative Kevin McCarthy of California said,
"Members are advised that we are proceeding to votes on the remaining 2 motions. I would advise the members that the world is watching, and I encourage every member of the House to vote yes." I yield back.
We're watching, all right, Mr. McCarthy. We're watching your political career, Paul Ryan's foolhardy ambition, Boehner's legacy of betrayal, and most of the GOP go down the toilet. Back in the lair of the Bilderberg pawn, Obama's White House haughtily dismissed today's defeat as a procedural snafu. John Bound for INFOWARS.com.
One of the items on this year's Bilderberg agenda is the elite's ongoing war on cash. Well, now, top economic forecaster Martin Armstrong is predicting a crash coming just after October.
Martin Armstrong began his studies into market behavior. Armstrong's work has become world-renowned. The model has successfully pinpointed not merely major specific days when events will be in advance, but it has provided one of the most consistent guides for understanding the turning points in the global economy and thus the business cycle, not merely within a domestic economy, but within the global economy on the collective basis. ArmstrongEconomics.com.
In 85, forming the G5, the dollar was up dramatically at that point. The Deutschmark was like 4 to the dollar. And they basically just stood up and said, okay, fine, we're going to, we want to see the dollar 40% lower. And that was the 87 crash. And because I went public and warned them they were going to create this crash if they do this, I mean, a common sense, you sold the Japanese, everything from Rockefeller Center on down. And they own like more than a third of the U.S. national debt. Now you stand up and you say you're going to devalue it by 40%. Don't you think they would sell? There's no rational discussion with these people. And so they just started selling, and that was your 87 crash.
Let's talk about this secret meeting in London to end cash. And along with that now is this huge push in the media to get rid of cash. That's a bold move, but again, let's talk about why they would want to do that, A, but then B, about the secret meeting.
Well, that's how they pull this off. The media is part of the tool. And it was Larry Summers who first came out and said, gee, interest rates should go negative. Now, he wasn't in the administration. He was just at Harvard. So what happens is they can, if the market rejects it, they can say, oh, that's just him talking. If it accepts it, all right, they're right behind it. So this is how politics really works. So what you're seeing right now is the media coming out, yeah, we should get rid of cash. And that is the balloon.
They're floating.
They're trying to get, yes. The reason I've been pretty much so vocal, coming from the professional side, liquidity is absolutely evaporating. And it is scary because that means when this thing turns down after October and government bonds, et cetera, you're going to see a massive, collapse. Massive. When this thing turns down after October and government bonds, et cetera, you're going to see a massive, collapse. Massive. Because there's no bid.
Good God.
And it's really, capital is scared to death everywhere. And they've been selling the longer-term paper, 10-year bonds, et cetera. The bonds have crashed, and they're moving everything into like 30-day to 6-month paper max, and because nobody knows what's going on.
Well, earlier this week, we learned that hackers linked to China hacked into the U.S. government. Well, now some things have come to light, letting us realize that this hack was a little bit more serious than what we were first told. These hackers may have accessed security clearance info for U.S. intelligence as well as military personnel. Now, obviously, much more damaging than the original vague story that, a few personnel files were accessed and things. Just a little cybersecurity breach. Now, the forms that were accessed were known as Standard Form 86. And these require applicants to fill out very personal information. This includes histories of mental illness, past arrests, any backgrounds in previous alcohol or drug problems, arrests, things like that. And one of the big things that they're telling us is that they've also accessed all of the Social Security numbers, which were not encrypted. J. David Cox, who is the president of the American Federation of Government Employees, said in a letter that we believe that the central personnel data file was the targeted database and that the hackers are now in possession of all personnel data for every federal employee, every federal retiree, and up to 1 million former federal employees. And the union believes that these hackers stole military records and veterans status information, address, birth date, job and pay history, health insurance, life insurance, and pension information, as well as age, gender, and race data. So obviously, this is a huge data breach. And of course, of utmost concern at the present moment are those U.S. employees who are stationed overseas, and especially in countries like China. Now, a cybersecurity failure that is just so huge with this is the fact that they did not even encrypt these people's Social Security numbers. So this just means that all the wrong people can do all sorts of awful things with these people's identities. Now, what we're also learning that makes this OPM hack such a catastrophe is that it went undetected for more than a year. The NSA did not discover the malware here. They did not discover this hack totally useless agency there, the NSA. A private company discovered that there was Chinese hackers linked into the government system. So it was a private company giving the Office of